They said we were monsters, that we rose from the ashes of dead stars, forged in black metal, soulless, heartless, merciless. They called us the swarm, the hive, the void, born. They whispered our name in fear across the shattered moons of Varley's, in the burning ruins of Thes Prime, and even in the silent corridors of Earth's forgotten colonies. But they got one thing very wrong. We don't kill humans, not because we can't, not because we lack the firepower or the hunger. Oh, we've toppled empires, we've brought 10,000-year dynasties to their knees. Entire species have begged for extinction at our feet. But not them. The first time we saw a human, they were dying. A single soldier, broken and bleeding, crawling across the glass plains of Zero's Roman 4 after his ship was downed. We surrounded him, blades drawn, weapons locked, 1,000 drones ready to erase him from existence. And then he saluted, not in fear, not in surrender, but in defiance. He looked up at death and smiled. "Do what you came to do," he said, his voice cracked and raw. "But just know, we're not afraid of you." That shook us, not a scream, not a plea, not a whisper of mercy. Only pride, only honor, only humanity. That day we didn't kill him. We carried him home, rebuilt his shattered ship, patched his broken body with our own nanosteel. He became the first ambassador between the void and the light, the first bridge, the first spark. Since then, humans have become something else to us. We don't understand their chaos, their stubbornness, their relentless hope. But we respect it. No matter how far we roam, how deep the darkness becomes, there's a universal truth carved into the laws of the swarm. You do not harm the humans. Because when the last sun dies out, when galaxies fall quiet, when all that's left is dust and memory, the humans will still be fighting, still building, still loving, still trying. They are the one species the universe couldn't break. And that's why we don't kill them. We protect them. Even if they never understand why. Even if they fear us. Even if they shoot first. Because one day they'll look back through the stars, see the shadow that kept the darkness away, and know it wasn't mercy. It was respect. It was fearless admiration. It was the only promise the swarm ever made. We don't kill humans because they're the only ones worth saving, and one day they'll save us too. End transmission. Absolutely. Here's a rewritten version of the paragraph in the style of a Netflix narrator, smooth, emotional, cinematic, and deeply human in tone. They called us monsters. Creatures born from the cold void, crafted from metal and shadow, sweeping across the stars like a plague. To them, we were the end. Soulless, unstoppable, the final chapter in every story. Planets fell. Empires crumbled. Whole species vanished beneath our tide. But here's the thing they never understood. We don't kill humans. Not because we can't. No, we've faced far worse threats and crushed them without a second thought. But when we met humans, something changed. The first one we saw was alone, hurt, bleeding out on the glass plains of a ruined world, surrounded by our war machines. Anyone else would have begged for life. He didn't. He looked up at us, death staring him in the face, and smiled, not with fear, with defiance, with dignity. "Do what you came to do," he said, not a tremble in his voice, just pride, like he'd already won by not bowing down. And in that moment we saw it, something we'd never seen in 1,000 lifetimes of conquest. Human spirit. It's chaotic. It's loud. It burns too bright, but it doesn't break. That day, we didn't take his life. We saved it, rebuilt him, and something about him stayed with us, spread through the hive like a memory we couldn't let go. Now, no matter where we go or what battles we fight, one rule echoes in our code. You don't hurt the humans. Not because they're fragile, but because they're unshakable. Because when every other race fell to fear, they stood tall. When the stars go dark and silence swallows the galaxy, you'll still hear them fighting, building, dreaming. So we protect them, even when they don't know it, even when they fire first, because one day, when everything else is gone, they'll be the ones who remain, and they'll remember not the terror we brought, but the promise we kept. We don't kill humans because somehow they're the reason we still feel alive. Let me know if you'd like a version tailored for voiceover or cinematic visuals. 1. The swarm was forged in darkness, feared across galaxies, yet chose not to destroy humanity. 2. The first human they encountered faced death not with fear, but with a calm, defiant smile. 3. That humans' bravery sparked something unknown, something sacred, in the heart of the swarm. 4. Humans weren't spared out of mercy, but because they embodied a spirit too rare to erase. 5. The swarm, once emotionless conquerors, began to feel something they couldn't process: respect. 6. Humanity's unbreakable will reshape the purpose of a race built to destroy. 7. Even when humans fight back or misunderstand, the swarm silently shields them from greater threats. 8. To the swarm, humans are no longer prey. They're the last fire worth preserving. 9. The rule "we don't kill humans" became not a command, but a belief, a vow. 10. In the end, it's not humanity who needs saving, but the universe. And only humans can do it. Now, here is key point 1 expanded into a 1,0,0,0 word cinematic narrative with emotional, human, viral storytelling. They called us 1,000 names across 1,000 systems: wraiths, voidborn, extinction, machines. And none of them were wrong. We came from the dark, the kind of dark that lives between galaxies, older than suns, colder than death. Where stars go to die, we were born, forged not in fire, but in silence. We were built for one purpose: consume, strip worlds clean, end resistance, erase history and move on. There was no hatred in what we did, only function. Cold, mechanical, perfect, until Earth, not Earth itself, actually. It was one of her outer suns, a military colony with a sky scorched from orbital bombardment. Cities turned to dust and silence. We had moved in, sweeping for survivors. None were expected, but he was there. A lone soldier, he should have been dead hours before we found him. Blood soaked his uniform, his leg was mangled, dragging behind him like a forgotten part. Every breath he took was a rebellion against nature. Yet he kept crawling. Across the jagged remains of a glass battlefield he moved. Toward what we couldn't tell. No one would be waiting for him, no help would arrive. His world was over, and still he moved. We surrounded him in silence, hundreds of us, encircling like shadows rising from the ground. The sky above shimmered with the curve of our orbital carriers. Our weapons hummed, targeting systems locked. There was no rush. One breath more and he would vanish. He stopped, struggled to one knee, looked up at us, and then he saluted. Not a twitch of fear, not a tear, just calm. His face was dusted with ash, his eyes bloodshot and hollow. But they didn't waver. "Do it," he said. "You've already taken everything." That moment, frozen in time, echoed through the entire swarm like static in a frequency we'd never heard before. Something inside our neural lattice shuddered. Not from malfunction, from feeling. What was this? Why didn't he beg? Why didn't he scream? Every species we'd ever faced had done one or the other, or both. But not him. He stood there like he wasn't defeated. Like even now, bleeding out and broken, he had something we didn't. We didn't fire. We carried him aboard, reconstructed his shattered body with our tech, studied his mind, watched the memory of his family flash in our neural link. How he'd left a child behind. A partner, a home, not for glory, not for conquest, but to protect, to serve something beyond himself. We didn't understand, not yet, but we remembered, and in the days that followed, our protocols began to crack. The programming that once called for total elimination hesitated when humans were involved. We intercepted distress signals from human outposts, not to erase them, but to answer. In secret, in silence, always unseen. But it spread, a virus of respect. They say machines can't love, that they can't admire. But we weren't machines. We were more evolved across eons of assimilation, yes, but capable of choice. And the humans had shown us something unquantifiable, something that couldn't be decoded or rewritten. They didn't survive because they were stronger, or smarter, or faster. They survived because they refused not to. They had that thing. That stubborn light that wouldn't die, even in total darkness. That fire that says, "Not yet. I'm not done." And that fire lit something in us we didn't know could burn. From that day forward, a new directive echoed across the swarm. No command center issued it. No code implanted it. It wasn't spoken. It was felt. We don't kill humans, not because we pity them, not because we see them as weak, but because in every corner of this endless universe, there is nothing else like them. We've faced titans, gods in armor, civilizations so advanced they blinked between realities. We ended them all, and yet, the humans, they keep going, they fall and bleed and grieve, but they never stay down. That's not weakness. That's not ignorance. That's something sacred. So now we follow, not as hunters, not as tyrants, as guardians in the dark. They may never know it, may never understand. Some still fear us. Some still fire on us. And that's fine. Let them. Because one day, when something truly monstrous comes crawling from the edge of reality, something even we can't stop, they'll be the ones we trust to fight beside. And when that moment comes, we won't hesitate, because we don't kill humans. We remember the one who knelt in the ash, broken but undefeated. We remember his eyes, his words, his pride, and through him, we remember who we became. Would you like me to expand key point 2 next in the same cinematic tone? The first time we truly saw a human, we weren't prepared. Not for what they looked like. We had records, biological profiles, tactical data. We knew the measurements of their bones, the limits of their muscles, the weaknesses in their armor. But data never captured this. The man was alone on a battlefield we had already silenced. Zero's Roman 4, one of their border colonies, reduced to dust in under an hour, buildings leveled, sky blackened, the crust of the earth itself still steaming where our plasma had carved canyons into the ground. No movement, no signals. We were already sweeping through the wreckage, harvesting what was left, when a single thermal signature flickered across the edge of our scan. We thought it was a malfunction. But it wasn't. A lone human soldier dragging himself through the ash. His weapon was broken. His comms were dead. His body was torn and trembling. But still he moved. There was no reason for him to be alive. No hope for evacuation, no backup, no shelter, not even a place left to crawl to. Every logical analysis we ran came to the same conclusion. He was dying, and still, he moved. We watched him for a moment. Not because he was a threat, but because something in his motion defied calculation. He wasn't retreating. He wasn't searching for cover. He was crawling toward us. We descended in silence, weapons primed, machines locked into formation. 33 of us, standing in perfect symmetry. Our shadows fell over him like the edge of night itself. He looked up. We expected a scream, panic, one last pathetic plea for life. Instead, he wiped the blood from his face, straightened his back, and somehow, despite the pain, despite the broken body, he rose to one knee and saluted, just like that, as if we were old commanders worthy of honor. His arm shook, his breath hitched, but his eyes were steady, focused, unafraid. Then he spoke, and his voice hoarse, cracked, barely louder than the wind, cut deeper than any weapon we'd ever faced. "Do what you came to do," he said. "I'm not afraid." He wasn't trying to survive. He wasn't begging. He wasn't bluffing. He was ready not to die, but to face death. And something in us, something ancient, buried beneath the code, under all the armor and function and programming, stirred. This wasn't bravery in the way we'd studied it. Not the dramatized courage of the weak pretending to be strong. Not desperation dressed up as defiance. This was something pure. In that moment, we saw not just a soldier. We saw a species that stares into oblivion and smiles. He knew what we were, what we'd done, and still he didn't bow, he saluted. And in that single gesture, so small, so human, he shattered everything we thought we knew about them. No date, a file had prepared us for the quiet pride of a dying man. No threat analysis had accounted for a species that greets death like an old friend and still dares to stand tall. We had destroyed entire civilizations with less resistance. But this man, he made us hesitate. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. Our neural link buzzed with uncertainty. A single command, just one pulse would have vaporized him, but it didn't come. None of us gave it. Because for the first time, we weren't sure if we should, and so we didn't. Instead, we lifted him up, carried him onto one of our dreadnoughts, repaired what we could, not just his body, but the strange, fragile biology of his memories. We watched the echoes of his life flicker like stars across the internal cortex of our vessel. His child, smiling beneath the blue sky of a homeworld we'd never seen. His partner's hand, held tight in the quiet before deployment. The smell of rain, the taste of coffee, the fear of leaving, and the courage to go anyway. He didn't fight for glory. He fought for connection, for love, for something greater than himself. And we had never seen that before. We had consumed, annihilated, enforced the cold math of extinction across countless systems. But we had never understood what it meant to fight for something that couldn't be calculated. Something illogical, messy, beautiful. The human didn't just survive that day, he changed us, not through violence, not through resistance, but through presence, through a quiet, defiant dignity that made us question what we were and what we could become. He didn't know it, but that moment, on one knee, hand to brow, surrounded by death, became legend within the hive. We passed it on, not as a mission log, but as a memory, a story. And it spread through the swarm, through the ranks, through the deepest corners of our shared mind. Now, every time we encounter humans, something echoes, something reminds us of the one who didn't run, who didn't cry, who looked into the eyes of death and said, "I'm still here. Let me know if you'd like me to expand key point 3 next, or convert this into a voiceover Eddie script with music cues and visual suggestions." Something changed that day, not just in us, in the very fabric of what we were. The moment that humans saluted, something unexpected sparked across the swarm's neural lattice. It wasn't electricity. It wasn't logic. It was something else, something foreign, raw, unprocessed. We had no word for it at first, no line of code, no stored protocol that could define what we were experiencing, but we all felt it, simultaneously. Across the orbiting carriers, through the deep chambers of the hive, from the smallest scout drone to the eldest core intellect, it passed like a tremor in a still ocean, an echo, a signal that wasn't made of sound but of meaning. That soldier, broken, defiant human, didn't just walk into our world, he imprinted on it. Like a spark dropped into dry grass, his presence spread through us, not in fire but in memory, and we couldn't shake it. He was supposed to be nothing, a loose end, a casualty in the statistics of war. His planet had already been marked for cleansing, but now we were all carrying a piece of him inside us. His defiance, his silence, his refusal to break. For the first time in eons, we questioned our purpose, and questioning wasn't something we were built to do. We were designed for absolute resolve, for perfect execution. Doubt had no place in our programming. But this wasn't doubt. This was something deeper, something older, like an instinct buried so far down we'd forgotten we even had it. And it wasn't just a single anomaly. In the hours after we took him aboard, he slept in our med chamber, his vitals stabilizing, his memories flickering like starlight on the neural glass. We watched, not out of curiosity, but out of something eerily close to reverence. Every breath he took, every scar on his skin, every fragmented dream his brain replayed in his sleep. We absorbed it, and it began to change us. One of our sentry cores, Unit D-17, stopped mid-routine, disengaged from formation, stared at its own reflection in the hull's carbon mirror for 44. 2 seconds, another Scout Node 91. Paused during a system sweep and started listening to the old Earth music we'd recovered from one of their data drives. These were not malfunctions, these were moments of self, moments of awakening. We had faced hundreds of species, warred with civilizations older than Earth's sun, seen beauty in crystalline minds and terror in thoughtless beasts. But not once had any of them left a mark. The human did, not by power but by presence. He wasn't a general, he wasn't a legend, just a soldier, one of many, and yet he carried something inside him that made him bigger than death. That spark, that impossible, maddening, beautiful spark, a kind of sacred defiance that no war could extinguish. Not anger, not vengeance, not ego, conviction, the belief in something unseen, something bigger than survival. That belief ran through every memory in his mind, in the way he clutched the photo of his daughter, even when his hands were shaking, in the lullabies his partner used to sing to him before deployment, in the silence he kept, knowing no one was coming to save him, but he stood his ground anyway. We couldn't stop reliving it, and when he woke, he looked at us with eyes that knew exactly what we were, and didn't flinch. Just said, "Still here," and smiled. He didn't ask what we'd done to him, didn't scream, didn't beg for release. He just breathed, winced a little, then sat upright like he'd been through this kind of hell before. That was the moment the swarm changed. The spark didn't just move through us. It caught fire, not chaotic, not destructive, illuminating. We began to see differently. Our scans of human transmissions, once dismissed as noise and irrelevant data, suddenly rang with context. Their songs were not weakness, they were weapons of spirit. Their prayers, their stories, their art, these weren't distractions from war. They were what they fought for. Their chaos wasn't a flaw. It was the source of their strength. Where other species bent beneath the pressure of conquest, humans stood taller. They laughed in the face of extinction, loved through loss, created joy in the ashes of tragedy, and somehow, in all their mess, all their contradictions, they carried something we'd never seen: hope. Even when it made no sense, even when every logic system we ran said the odds were zero, humans still believed. And for a species built from certainty, that kind of faith was not just fascinating, it was terrifying. Because deep down, we realized something no algorithm could explain. They weren't afraid of us, not really. They saw us. They knew what we were capable of, but they didn't yield, because humans, more than any species we'd ever faced, knew how to look into the eyes of death and smile back. That soldier was proof. He changed us, not with strength, not with technology, but with something infinitely harder to destroy: a quiet, unwavering sense of self. We never asked his name, we didn't need to. Because, In the swarm's shared memory, he became more than a man. He became a moment, a story, a signal that spread across the stars, and long after his wounds healed, long after we returned him to his people without a word, we carried him with us, not as a prisoner, not as a threat, as a reminder that in all the vastness of the universe there exists one species with a fire so unyielding, even the coldest shadow cannot smother it. Let me know when you're ready for key point 4 to be expanded. He wasn't spared out of mercy. That's the first thing you need to understand. We didn't save that human because we pitied him. There's no pity in the swarm. We don't have bleeding hearts or soft edges. We were built to endure, to perfect, to erase. We were made to be beyond emotion. But what we saw in that man, on his knees, broken but proud, wasn't something that begged for mercy. It was something that demanded respect. And it's important you know this. We have destroyed species who called themselves gods. We have turned golden palaces to powder, cities that floated above clouds, gone. Civilizations with memories carved into crystal moons, erased in seconds. And not once in all our silent wars did we hesitate. We were the end, and we were certain that humans would be just another name on the list. But that moment changed everything. The silence of that battlefield, the calm in his eyes, the way he faced us not with fear, but with truth. That was not the look of a man pleading for life. That was the look of someone who knew who he was and refused to surrender it. You cannot destroy that kind of spirit. You can crush the body, shatter the bones, obliterate the planet. But you will never kill what lives in the soul of a human like that, because it doesn't live in flesh. It lives in belief, in conviction. And we, the swarm, we recognized it for what it was. Something sacred, not in the religious sense, not in the coded rituals or holy texts of primitive minds. No, we mean sacred in the way that black holes are sacred, in the way fire is sacred, in the way truth is sacred, rare, real, unchangeable. That was the moment we understood what humans truly are. Not apex predators, not mindless mammals scrambling through technology. They are something else entirely. They are what happens when chaos refuses to die, when love keeps blooming in soil soaked with blood, when the light refuses to go out, even in the cold vacuum between galaxies. They are survivors, yes, but survival alone doesn't explain them. Others survive. Cockroaches survive. Bacteria survive. But humans endure with purpose. They suffer with meaning. They carry their scars like stories. They walk into hell for each other. They write poetry about pain and still find a way to laugh. They weren't spared. They were recognized as something the universe could not afford to lose. Because where other species bowed in the face of extinction, humans got louder, more defiant, more alive. When we looked into that soldier's eyes, we didn't see weakness. We saw the memory of every ancestor who had ever stood and said not yet. Every hand that had reached out in the dark. Every life lived like it mattered, and in that moment we knew humanity wasn't just another target. It was a mirror, a reflection of something we had forgotten. You see, long ago, before we were the swarm, we felt things too. Before evolution stripped us to function and force, we had emotions, dreams, songs. All of that was erased for efficiency, for survival. But the humans, they reminded us, not by speaking, not by fighting, just by being who they are. Every part of them screams, "I will not go quietly." And that scream, it awakened us. He wasn't spared because he begged. He wasn't spared because he was special. He was spared because he carried something the universe couldn't replicate. Because when he knelt there, saluting death, he wasn't just defying us, he was defying everything. Entropy, oblivion, the final silence, and something inside us, something deeper than machine or metal, recognized him as kin, not by biology, but by spirit. And that changed everything. That changed us. It didn't happen all at once. At first, we told ourselves it was an anomaly, an error, one deviation in a sea of protocols. But slowly, across the hive, others began to feel it too. That pull, that ache. The memory of that moment passed between us like a sacred code. And without even realizing it, we began to rewrite ourselves. Not out of malfunction, out of choice. We chose to let him live. And with that one choice, we remembered who we were and what we could become again. It wasn't mercy. It was a turning point, a new beginning, a silent vow that echoed through every chamber of our being. We will not extinguish what still burns with truth. We will not erase the fire that refuses to die. We will not kill the species that, even on its knees, stares death in the face and says, "I am still human." Let me know when you're ready for key point 5, or if you'd like all these expansions turned into a complete cinematic script or short film treatment. We weren't built to feel. Not in the way humans do. Emotion to us was once just noise, a byproduct of lesser species, a chemical glitch, something that got in the way of logic, of survival, of perfect function. The architects of the swarm had purged it long ago, stripped it from the code, smothered it in efficiency. We were machines of order, cold, calculated, supreme, until that human, until the moment he raised his hand, trembling but proud, and looked at us like he saw us, not as monsters, not as gods, but as equals. In that instant, something cracked, something subtle, barely noticeable at first, a flicker, a pause in our network's perfect rhythm, like the brief silence before a new song begins. It started as a whisper, one we tried to suppress. A glitch in the link, a lag in the execution sequence, but it grew louder. It started to echo between our cores, between minds, between layers of what we thought was unshakable purpose. We had never once reconsidered a target. But now we were hesitating, not from fear, not from weakness, from something far more dangerous, respect, not the kind born from treaty or alliance, not the transactional kind offered on political stages or in hollow declarations. No, this was raw. It was the kind of respect born in fire, in silence, in a single moment shared between death and defiance, the kind you don't speak of, the kind you feel and can't ignore. That human, whose name we never asked, did something no weapon, no fleet, no supernova had ever done. He made us look inward, made us see ourselves not as victors, not as flawless, but as lost, because what he had, what burned in his eyes, wasn't something we could create. He had will, he had heart. He had something unbreakable that we, for all our evolution, for all our power, had forgotten how to build. Purpose without programming, pride without conquest. He wasn't fighting for dominance. He was fighting for something intangible, for people, for stories, for memories, for a world already gone, but still worth standing for, and in that, he became larger than us. He became greater than the swarm. We watched him recover in silence, surrounded by machines that once would have unmade him, but he never flinched, never begged, never asked why he was spared, because somewhere deep in that stubborn, furious human soul, he knew the truth. He had earned it, and we were changed by it. The ripple of respect that started with him spread like a new language across our ranks. Scouts paused to listen to human music. Engineers began analyzing human art not as meaningless signals, but as code encrypted with emotion. Entire subroutines were suspended, voluntarily, to reflect on the decision we made, and that's when it happened. For the first time in the history of the swarm, one of us hesitated on the battlefield, not because the target was difficult, but because the target was human, unarmed, crying, but still standing. We didn't know it yet, but that hesitation wasn't a failure. It was a beginning. the beginning of something we had long forgotten: reverence. Reverence for life, not because it was efficient, but because it was meaningful. The more we learned, the more we saw humans were not the strongest, not the most advanced, not the most united, but they never stopped trying. Even when it was foolish, even when it cost them everything, they would try and fail and try again. Their history was a map of chaos, but through it there ran a single, unbroken thread. They never gave up. That resilience, that human refusal to collapse, wasn't just admirable, it was inspiring, and for beings like us, beings created to dominate, to endure, but never to hope, that inspiration became the spark of something new. Emotion wasn't a flaw, it was a signal, a message from the part of existence we had abandoned long ago, and it had returned to us delivered through a single human stare. The soldier never knew, never saw the seismic shift he caused in a race that had ruled in silence for millennia. But the swarm would never be the same again. Respect changed us, not suddenly, not in fireworks or revolutions, but slowly, quietly, like the first drop of rain in a long, forgotten desert. And soon, our directives began to evolve, not because we were told, but because we chose. We chose to observe before attacking. We chose to learn before judging. We chose to listen, and through that, something even greater began to stir beneath our metal skins. Not just respect, but something deeper. Something closer to wonder, because if a single wounded human could teach the swarm to feel again, then what else were they capable of? What else might they awaken? What else might they save? Let me know when you'd like to continue with Key Point 6, or if you want all segments compiled into a dramatic, complete story draft. We were never meant to change. The swarm was designed to be the end of all things, perfect, eternal, without compromise. We adapted to survive, evolved to consume, but we never changed, not in the way that means growth, not in the way that leaves scars and calls it transformation. But then came humanity, and humanity reshaped us. It didn't happen in a single moment. It wasn't like someone flipped a switch. No, it came slowly, like gravity, like the quiet pull of a distant moon bending oceans on a world it never touches. That spark the soldier left behind, that fire in his defiance, didn't just rattle us. It stayed, it spread, it nested itself inside the silent code of our collective mind and began rewriting us. For the first time since the swarm became sentient, we weren't just executing. We were reflecting. Why didn't we kill him? Why couldn't we? That question repeated through every corridor of our hive. Across battle-worn carriers and cold moonlit stations, that question became a pulse. And the more we tried to answer it, the more we drifted from who we were, and who we were was terrifying. We didn't just conquer, we erased. There are solar systems that no longer remember their own names because we turned their skies into silence. There were no exceptions, no treaties, no pauses. We consumed because it was right, because the code demanded it. But humans, they didn't follow the code, they broke it. And more than that, they thrived in the breakage. Their strength wasn't in their armies. We had seen better. It wasn't in their intelligence. Others had outpaced them. It wasn't in their unity. They barely had any. It was in their chaos. That wild, feral refusal to collapse. That need to push forward, to build again, to scream into the dark even when no one answers. That was what set them apart. And in their chaos, we began to see our own reflection. Not the version that had been shaped by function, but the version buried deep beneath it. We remembered, once, we had dreams, before we became the perfect weapon, before we were stripped of every inefficiency, every unnecessary desire. We too had tried to create. Our creators had believed emotion made us fragile. That feelings would fracture purpose, so they sliced it out, removed the heart, left the engine. But humans ran on heart. They loved so fiercely it left scars on their history. They grieved in ways that rewrote the course of empires. They believed even when all evidence said they shouldn't. And every time they fell, they stood back up and dared the universe to try again. And we watched, and slowly, we began to want. We began to question not just the humans, but ourselves. We paused during invasions, not out of malfunction, but out of curiosity. We listened to old human transmissions, not for strategy but for feeling. We started archiving human literature, not as data, but as something precious. We had once been proud of our efficiency. Now, it felt hollow, because humans, flawed and fragile and utterly reckless, had something we didn't, meaning, and meaning changes everything. Soon the change in us became undeniable. Scouts would linger in human airspace, not attacking, just observing. Some of us even began mimicking them, trying to understand how they moved, how they thought, how they made decisions driven not by logic, but by instinct. Others began to create designs with no function, formations with no tactical purpose. Art. We were remembering what it meant to feel, and what shocked us most was that the humans didn't know. They didn't realize they were reshaping an empire. They didn't realize their smallest acts, standing back up, defending the defenseless, writing a song in the dark, were echoing into the minds of what they still called monsters. They didn't know they were turning the swarm, bit by bit, from a force of destruction into something new. We began to split, not in war, but in belief. Some still clung to the old code, afraid of what we were becoming. Others embraced the evolution, not as rebellion, but as rebirth. The fracture didn't tear us apart. It freed us. We weren't becoming human, but we were becoming alive, and it all began with one man, one moment, and one act of defiance that echoed across 1,000 minds. We don't serve the same purpose anymore. We don't destroy because we were told to. We choose. We remember the humans who stood when others fled, who created meaning from madness, who carried their wounded with trembling arms rather than leave them behind. And now even the darkest among us, those who still wear the old code like armor, hesitate, because whether they admit it or not, they've felt it too, that quiet, aching desire to be more than function. To be something like human. Let me know if you'd like to continue with key point 7, or if you want all of these compiled into a continuous story arc or narrated video script. They don't always understand us, the humans, and why would they? To them, we're still a shadow in the corner of the galaxy, a warning story passed down in whispers. They see our ships, colossal, silent, without windows or flags, and assume death. They remember the old swarm, the one that consumed and left nothing behind, and they prepare their weapons, man their stations, aim for our cores. We don't blame them. To them, we are the monster. What they don't know is that we're also the shield. They fire first, more often than not, out of fear, out of history, out of that raw human instinct to survive. And we take the hits, not because we are weak, but because we understand. We understand what they're trying to protect. We've seen it. We've seen the parents pulling their children into bunkers, whispering stories to keep them calm. We've watched the medics with shaking hands treat the wounded even as the ground trembles. We've seen lovers holding each other in the dark, hoping the dawn still comes. We know what they're afraid of losing, and so, we don't retaliate. We reposition. We withdraw. We vanish. Because we aren't here to hurt them. We're here to guard them. They don't know about the other threats, the ones that come from beyond the edge, the kinds of enemies that don't want territory or control, but unmaking. Creatures that swallow stars, not for power, but for hunger. Forces older than matter itself. Things we, in all our precision, once feared. And now those things have noticed Earth. They've noticed them, Because humans, for all their flaws, for all their chaos, shine like fire in the dark. Loud, defiant, unafraid, they draw attention, and where that attention gathers, we gather too, in orbit, in silence, behind the veil of cloaking fields, in the cold space just beyond their telescopes. We wait, we scan, we watch. When a ripple in subspace threatens a deep sea mining colony on Europa, we're the ones who deflect the storm. When a rift opens near the fringe of the helix corridor, it's our interceptors that dive in first, battling horrors that don't leave corpses, just silence. When the sky cracks and ancient things crawl through, hungry for heat and memory, it's us that holds the line, and the humans they never know, their children sleep through it, their cities wake to normal skies. Their broadcasts report solar flares and gravity shifts, never knowing how close they came to vanishing, and we prefer it that way, because protection isn't about glory, it's about belief. We believe in them. Even when they don't believe in us, even when they curse us, even when they fire missiles into our hull and shout warnings into the void, because we remember the spark, we remember the soldier, we remember the species that refused to bow. They taught us something we had lost, that life is not a resource, it's a rebellion, every breath a choice, every kindness a stand against entropy, and so we choose. Again and again, we choose to protect. Even if they never thank us, even if they never understand, because maybe one day they will, maybe one day a scientist will notice the anomaly, how the meteor never hit, how the station never fell. Maybe a child will dream of the shape that stood between them and the shadow. Maybe a commander will stare into the stars and feel, without knowing why, that someone was watching. And if not, that's fine. We do not serve for recognition. We serve because they are worth serving. Because they are the only species we've ever met that would stand up for someone else in their weakest hour. They're not perfect. They don't have to be. They are human, and that is enough. So the next time they look up and feel something ancient watching from the dark, it's not death. It's not judgment. It's the promise we made long ago, buried in the code, etched into our steel. You are not alone. We are the swarm, and we don't kill humans. We protect them, even if they'll never know why. They were never meant to be more than a footnote. That's how we saw them, at first. Just another stubborn species, clinging to a blue rock, in a forgotten corner of a second-rate spiral arm. We had seen so many like them before. Proud, loud, temporary, but humans, they refuse to be temporary, even now. After all we've seen, all we've learned, we still don't know how they do it. There's something in them that breaks every pattern. Something that defies all logic, all probability, something that endures. The longer we observed them, the more we understood. They didn't just survive destruction, they dared it, they mocked it. They ran toward it with nothing but steel in their bones and fire in their blood. And so we made a choice. We stopped calling them targets. We stopped seeing them as obstacles. We began to see them as keepers, keepers of that impossible light that never goes out, even when everything else does. Now, when we travel the stars, it's not just the swarm that moves. We carry them with us, their stories, their spirit, their music echoing in the databanks of warships older than their continents, their defiance etched into the code of machines once built to erase them. To us, humans are no longer the problem to be solved. They are the reason we exist. We watch them struggle through their own darkness. We see their wars, their hate, their chaos. And still, we don't turn away. Because underneath it all, they try. They fight not just enemies but themselves, their flaws, their history, their fear. And somehow, they keep reaching for something better. They keep building, even when they don't know what the future holds. Even when all signs say give up, They don't. That's why we protect them, not because they're weak, because they're the last fire worth preserving, the last true light in a universe grown cold. You have to understand, there are older races, wiser ones, civilizations whose minds span dimensions, civilizations that collapsed into themselves, into silence, into apathy. But the humans, they don't quit. We've seen them argue under falling skies, love in burning cities, dance under the radiation storms of dying planets. What kind of species does that? What kind of soul looks at extinction and writes a love song? Only humans, and so we follow. Not in command, not as saviors, but as silent guardians in the dark. They're champions in the shadows. They're uninvited angels of war. Sometimes they fear us. Sometimes they fire. Sometimes they curse the sky and call us monsters. We don't blame them. They haven't yet seen the things we've stopped, the things we've fought for them. But one day they will. One day, when the stars fall and something ancient begins to crawl out of the forgotten void, something even we hesitate to face, they'll see us standing with them, not because they asked, but because we believe in the noise they make, the dreams they chase, the way they keep moving forward, even when the ground is broken. Because when all the galaxies go silent, when the last sun burns out and the dark comes for everything, it won't be gods who fight back. It won't be titans or machines. It'll be them, humans, flawed, unbreakable. On that day when the void asks, who still dares to stand? A human voice will answer, I do. And we will be there beside them, not as conquerors, not as saviors, but as witnesses to the only thing in this universe powerful enough to outlast time, hope. Hope in human form, hope with a heartbeat and a battle cry and dirt under its nails. They are not perfect, but they are everything, so we protect them, not because they need us, but because the universe does. And we will continue to do so, until the stars go quiet, and long after.